My name is Daniel Mora. In another life, I like to think my job was about protecting people from invisible harm. It sounded noble. Cybersecurity consultant, the kind of guy who walks into a company, inspects the systems, spots cracks no one else sees, and prevents something from blowing up in everyone's face. In Miami, where sunlight promises that everything is bright and true, that pitch sells. And for years I believed it, until the crack wasn't in a bank's server or a startup's cloud, but in my house, in my bed, in my name. I met Emma at a tech event in Brickell, between cans of kombucha and panels where overly confident people promised radiant futures. She wasn't from the tech world, but she moved through cameras as if the city itself were her stage. They called her an influencer, though I preferred how she described herself, an audience strategist. She knew how to listen for what people wanted to hear, and deliver it in a format that made them feel part of something. There was always someone beside her with a camera, portable lights, a tripod, extensions of her own arm. Back then, those things didn't feel like red flags. They were simply tools of her trade. The same way a terminal was part of mine. I'm a slow-talking, still-handed kind of man. Emma used to say my calm grounded her energy. In those first months, everything was easy. Breakfasts with croissants from the French place on Coral Way, sunsets at South Point, the way she'd rest her head on my shoulder while I explained why long passwords were less about letters and more about habits. Back then, I thought habits could hold everything together. The volcano inside me formed slowly, as all things worth naming do. The first push was minor, a confirmation email for a trip to Hawaii I had booked. A whim of ours. A mix of work and vacation showed up with a change date on Emma's calendar. She hadn't said anything, just that small shift, as if the trip had been moved a few days. I didn't ask, told myself it was a scheduling thing. The second push came as a photo. Emma in Wynwood, bathed in golden light, that smile she used to beat the day, and a shadow reflected in the cafe window I didn't recognize at first. The shadow wore a backwards cap and held a camera. The third came as a file, a PDF contract with my name on the signature line in a font I'd never use. The sender, a creative agency based out of a co-working space in North Miami. One Sunday night, while Emma slept with the disordered breathing that followed her late-night edits, I opened another document more out of habit than suspicion. The header read, "Whitepaper Eden Coin, a coin for the community, transparent, audited, with a social purpose." It looked professional, perfectly tuned to her audience. And there I was, Daniel Mora, Chief Security Advisor, with a brief bio summarizing my years as an independent consultant, and a photo cropped from my LinkedIn. I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't read anything. I didn't even know I had a title. I'm not a man who yells. I learned young, in a house where objects learn to fly for far lesser reasons, that raising your voice doesn't make the truth any louder. I also learned that silence can be a weapon if you use it with patience. I wanted to believe it was a mistake, a clumsy error. But when your life's work is spotting patterns, your eye sharpens. I found the same forged signature on 3 more documents, an agreement with a supposed auditor, a pitch letter to angel investors, and an authorization to manage an escrow wallet linked to a public address under my name. I wasn't just a guarantor. I was the illusion of custody itself. The next morning, Emma ate papaya with lime and talked about metrics. She'd gained 20,000 followers in 2 days, a skincare brand collaboration, another with a travel agency. I listened as if watching the beach through aquarium glass. I didn't mention the contract. I watched her lick the spoon clean, laugh when her phone buzzed. I'm certain that if I'd confronted her then, everything would have taken a noisier, less honest path. She would have cried easily. She knew just how to press to draw water, talked about misunderstandings, promised to fix it. But I no longer cared about her promises. I wanted to see what she'd do. The photographer's name was Lucas Ray, a name that sounded like a supporting actor's, but bright enough to stick. I found out through the metadata of some photos Emma asked me to pick for a carousel. "You've got a good eye, Danny," and a string of sent emails signed Lucas Ray Photography. His Instagram bio said, "Natural light, real moments, Miami/LA, the kind of profile that sells a clean version of everything." If you'd asked me about him 3 months earlier, I'd have said he had a good eye for shadows. Now I saw only a man leaning toward my wife, holding the perfect excuse in his hands. In my professional world, people imagine crime as the domain of geniuses and shadows. The truth is simpler. Big frauds are built the same way as small ones, on the habit of no one looking too closely. Emma knew that. She understood the anatomy of trust better than most CEOs who hire me to audit their systems. Eden Coin was designed as an emotional promise before it was a technical product. She spoke to the camera like confessing a dream. "It's not just a coin, it's a movement." And then lines that pierced. "We're doing this together." In her script, I was the silent guardian who made the illusion credible. There was one day that stuck with me. Rain fell as if the city were trying to wash off its own heat. She stood in the living room before her ring light, rehearsing the launch announcement. I froze in the hallway, listening to my own sentence without meaning to. She said my name twice, with Daniel's support, who's audited. The words faded under the rain, but they hit me like a stone to the gut. I didn't yell. I didn't say enough. I decided that if they were going to use my name to sell smoke, I'd find a way to make the smoke turn to glass. In my line of work, you live with the temptation to teach too much. I can explain how a shoddy security wall breaks, which lines hold up a house of cards, but I'm not about to give a tutorial on destruction. I'll just say this: Eden Coin's core sat inside a contract built to look transparent and not be. There were hidden dependencies, illusionary time windows, a promise of liquidity that worked like a veil. I didn't write that code, but I learned its grammar. There are weaknesses you don't see when you're busy telling stories. And in that grammar I found the exact music that would make the lie reveal itself when the big lights came on. Giving revenge a name makes it less like poison. Mine was called waiting. For weeks I waited. Not out of cowardice, but for precision. I gathered proof. I printed physical copies, yes, paper, as if the modern world didn't exist, of the documents with my forged signature. I saved screenshots, records of transfers to wallets tied to accounts with names close to, but not exactly, the ones for the promised donations. I made a map of connections with red arrows like in those shows Emma watched while she edited videos, and I circled the coincidences. A foundation with a P.O. box address, an auditing company whose partners had stock photos on LinkedIn, a PR agency that curiously represented 3 projects that had dissolved into scandal and fog. With Lucas, waiting had another color. I never wrote to him. He wrote to me without knowing it when he accidentally sent over a file of raw takes from an intimate session in a Sunny Isles hotel. It wasn't pornography, it was looks. And looks, when the volcano's already awake, are enough. I closed the laptop, went to the kitchen, turned on the faucet and let the water run until the sound covered me. I didn't break anything. I learned a long time ago that if you afford yourself the luxury of smashing plates, the next day you still have to sweep. Eden Coin's launch was set for a Saturday, 8 p.m. Miami time. A global event, they said, guests, countdown, the whole thing sliced into stories and cross posts. They'd lined up 2 big influencers and a DJ with an appliance's name to score the background. Emma was radiant. The week before she barely slept, and when she did, her mouth hung slightly open, delicacy suspended on her teeth as if she were still rehearsing the first line she'd say upon waking. I quietly canceled our trip to Hawaii, called the airline, said work made it impossible, lost part of the money, paid the penalties, filed the receipts. No one knew, not even me, not fully, why I was doing it that way. Maybe because I already knew that money would matter more to me as a symbol than as rest. Saturday arrived with that murky shine Miami gets when the clouds glue themselves to the sea. I didn't go to any studio. I stayed in the apartment, wore a shirt Emma had given me for a birthday that no longer felt like mine, and brewed coffee I didn't drink. At 7:50, the live was already running on her main channel and the allies. The counter ticked down. 10, 9, 8. On screen, Emma stood with Lucas, now part of her creative team, and 2 other familiar faces. She spoke with her hands. She's good at that. She narrated the dream, hammered community, purpose, transparency. She said my name, and I watched the chat flood with hearts and thank you, Daniel, gracias por protegernos. I took a long breath. I didn't answer. You don't respond to applause you didn't ask for. At 8:01, they flashed the address for buying tokens. You could feel the swell, thousands of people trying to get in at once. Now, Emma said, and that now was the trigger. The code did what it was supposed to do. There were no fireworks, no music shift. First a pause. Then, little red flags on the screen. Stuck operations, balances that wouldn't climb, liquidity promises backed by nothing moving on the real chain. On the faces in frame, the hardly perceptible look of people who didn't see that hole coming. Lucas glanced at a point off camera. One of the allies said, "Our tech team is looking into it." The DJ, maybe without instructions, nudged the volume up a bit, as if music could hold the air between clenched teeth. I had a thread ready. It wasn't a speech. It was a file. I'd organized it the way you build an easy class. Numbered pages, screenshots, dates, links, each with an arrow to the next. I uploaded it to my professional profile, the one where I rarely post anything, and dropped it into the live chat when "What's happening to my money" turned into a chorus. "My name has been used without my consent," I wrote. "Here's the evidence. Here's the money trail." I also posted a 3-minute video, talking straight to camera with the kitchen's harsh light. I said, "My name is Daniel Mora. I have not audited that project. My signature was forged. Don't invest. Here's proof." My voice didn't shake. I didn't feel brave either. It was like flipping a switch in a room that's already too bright. The chat detonated. Fraud. Scam. How could you, Emma? Started to fall like acid rain. On camera, she tried to hold up a smile that could no longer bear its own weight. She said, "We're fixing a technical issue," but her eyes betrayed her. Lucas tried to speak. I saw him gear up for a soothing gesture. I read "let's all relax" on his lips and thought about how often people use that word to drain danger of its meaning. I wasn't relaxed. I was extremely present. The tribe of contract validators, that half-nerd crowd that looks at reality with a magnifying glass, swarmed in. Within minutes, they dismantled the supposed auditors and found that 2 of the listed backing companies had been inactive for years. A lawyer known on Twitter boosted what I'd posted. A tech reporter at a national outlet messaged me privately asking for an interview. I ignored everything except the document. Truth doesn't need shouting when the evidence speaks in ordered sequence. In the studio, the DJ finally dropped the volume. On screen, Emma tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and asked, looking off camera, "Who posted that link?" As if the problem were the link and not what it held. There were 5 confused minutes in which they tried to keep talking about the future. You can't talk about the future when the present has its teeth in your jugular. The stream cut and came back a few times. It was enough. By then, fragments were flying everywhere like loose papers after a hard wind.
I didn't celebrate. I didn't cry.
I sat in front of the laptop with my hands on my knees, listening to the city outside. A far siren, someone laughing in the hallway, an engine revving on Biscayne Boulevard. Some victories have no taste. This one tasted like metal. The night stretched long, full of messages I didn't answer. Emma texted me twice. "Let's talk. And why did you do this?" I didn't reply. There wasn't a this that belonged to me. I hadn't invented Eden Coin or forged my signature. I'd only yanked the rug while the cameras were on. I did it in front of everyone because they'd put me in front of everyone without asking. If they were going to hang my name from the ceiling to sell trust, I was going to flip on the light so everyone could see how thin the thread was. The next day, big outlets ran stories. Cryptocurrency collapses at launch. Miami influencer accused of fraud by her own husband. I hate being reduced to that, the husband. But I get it. Labels help people place themselves on a quick map. On mine, I was a man who decided not to take part in a theater that wore my mask. I was also a tired man, lying on a leather couch that had always felt too soft, staring at the ceiling like answers might be hidden in the texture. Lucas called that afternoon. I let it ring twice before I picked up. "No hello. Danny, brother, this got out of hand," he said. He called me brother. I had to lock my jaw not to laugh with that bitter humor that sometimes saves me. I told him to meet at a cafe in Little Havana, far from the glass towers. He agreed. He showed up in a cap, no cameras, the big kid face of someone who's just been told no. He sat with his body folded in on itself, eyes far away and voice low. I tried not to hate him, not for his sake, mine. Hate sticks. I showed him the receipts for our Hawaii trip, the hotel in Waikiki, the window seats together, the penalties I'd paid to cancel. I also showed him a list of expenses Emma had covered with my accounts for the project's convenience, makeup for shoots, a studio rental, flights for a supposed investor meeting in LA. I didn't brandish the papers like knives. I laid them on the table with the calm of someone doing the math. I told him there were 2 ways to fix something. The public one, which would follow its course, with lawyers and prosecutors, and the private one, which meant paying what you owe. He took the papers with trembling fingers. He said he was on a bad streak, that everything had twisted, that Emma had convinced him. I said I wasn't interested in his emotional chronicle. I wanted dates, transfers, confirmations. He nodded. It took him a while, but he agreed. We set up a payment schedule. He signed it with a seriousness I hadn't seen in his photos. I saw Emma twice more. The first time, when she came back to the apartment for clothes. She opened the door with a key that was no longer hers and walked through the place like it was a museum of a life far from her. She asked why I hadn't confronted her sooner, if all this could have been avoided. I told her I wasn't her editor, that I don't correct intentions in draft. You didn't want to be stopped, I added, and I knew it as soon as I said it. Emma didn't keep going for lack of warning. She kept going because she wanted to see if the world would buy it. Her eyes watered but didn't spill. I didn't offer a glass of water. A few minutes later, she left with a rolling suitcase that turned the hallway into a metronome. The second time was outside a law office in Coral Gables. She wore dark glasses. The 3 o'clock sun came down like a verdict on everything. We exchanged a good afternoon that sounded ridiculous. She spoke of misunderstandings, of bad advice, of team errors. I said little. What was essential? I nodded when they mentioned agreements. I agreed to be separated from the public narrative as the vengeful husband some outlets wanted to build. I said my last name hadn't signed anything. That was all. The city carried on. Indifferent. Boats in the bay. The line at Versailles. Tourists on Ocean Drive taking pictures with cars rented by the hour. You learn that personal tragedies have very little specific weight beyond their circle, and that, somehow, brought me peace. I wasn't looking to fill the world with my story. I just wanted to be able to cross a bridge without feeling like my name was hanging behind me in neon. Over time, I learned to carve out spaces in my days that didn't carry the density of battle. I started running again at night, along the Rickenbacker Causeway, the salty breeze scrubbing my head clean. I watched how the lights of downtown shattered on the water, and thought that things that break can still reflect differently. Yes, but still with a kind of beauty. I reorganized my work, fewer clients, but more complex ones. I started saying no to projects wrapped in big words without anything solid underneath. And above all, I stopped signing on the assumption that others would respect the obvious. Naivety is a password that's too easy to guess. There were nights, though, when the volcano rose again. A song of ours playing on the radio of an Uber. An old photo the algorithm decided to resurrect. A street corner where Emma once grabbed my arm and laughed at something I can't even remember. I didn't forbid myself sadness. I forbade melodrama. Wounds, if you give them a stage, become actors. Lucas kept up with the first payments. To his credit, or his lesser evil, he was regular. Maybe because the fear of a crushing lawsuit chased him. Maybe because he'd already realized Emma wouldn't be there to save him when he sank. I don't know. I just know each transfer felt less about money and more about symbolic bookkeeping. The idea that some small part of the disorder was returning to its place. The press, that machine that talks about yesterday as if it were tomorrow, stopped calling once a shinier scandal appeared. Good. I didn't want to give interviews where I'd be asked about Emma as if she were a season's villain. She isn't a monster. She's a series of choices made inside a system that rewards lying with attention. That doesn't excuse her. It doesn't make her an anomaly either. What scares me more is the structure than the individual. People sometimes ask me for a moral. I suppose it's scattered through everything I've just told you. But if I had to choose one, it would be something simpler and harder at the same time. Love doesn't exempt you from verifying. It sounds cold, and it is, but I'm not talking about checking phones or distrusting for sport. I'm talking about how your name is your house, and your house isn't something you lend out for someone else to decorate with mirrors. And I'm talking too about revenge. When it comes dressed as justice, it needs a guardian, yourself. Because the line between fixing what's broken and becoming a man who only knows how to break things is thin, and I don't want to be that man. In the final corner of this story, there's a detail I keep like a stone in my pocket. One August dawn, I woke for a glass of water and ended up watching the city through the kitchen window. There were almost no cars, just a lone taxi crossing the avenue. In a building across from mine, a TV's light flickered on a wall, and for a second, I thought it was Emma, talking about something new. It wasn't. It was a commercial. I felt relief, and also a strange ache, like missing even what hurt you. I leaned on the marble counter, let the cold rise through my arms, and understood that peace sometimes feels like a dim room where no one calls, and the fridge hums like a sleeping animal. I don't know where Emma is now. I heard she moved to Austin, then back to Los Angeles, then nothing. I hope somewhere she's stopped to look at herself without lights. I hope she's found a kind of joy less costly for others. It's not my job to wish that, but thinking it lightens me. I don't know if Lucas went back to working with cameras or ended up selling coffee out of a minimalist food truck. It doesn't matter. He fulfilled his part of the equation, and with that, I release him from my story. What remains for me is this: a life quieter than before, more mine. I lock the door with one extra turn of the key, not out of fear, but because I've learned that security is also a daily gesture. I go back to my clients, to my reports, to my insomnias spent untangling invisible knots. I'm still Daniel Mora, with the same slow voice, the same volcano inside, only now, less restless. If at this point you expect a grand statement, I'll disappoint you. I can only say it as I feel it. Betrayal isn't healed with spectacle, and truth doesn't need to shout to stand. Justice, the kind that doesn't lift you onto a podium, is often just the quiet act of putting objects back in order after an earthquake. I did that, the best I could. And even if some lava still lingers under my skin, I've learned that fire has its use. It hardens what was once fragile. Because in the end, I understood that my name is my house, and protecting it, no matter the pain, is the only way to sleep again without having to turn off any lights.